We are back here on the Analyticaliowan podcast. It is Sunday, May 31st, and we've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. Now, where I want to start is with an explanation of a couple of things, some behind the scenes stuff, if you will. You may have noticed there was not a podcast up for Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, and that wasn't intentional. I sat down, I was able to record them, but I'm a one man operation. And I ran into some log jams with my automation. Um, and I knew there was going to be issues getting it up to Spotify, but I figured I would deal with Spotify when it came. The problem was on the automation side, getting the episodes processed and up to YouTube, doing it through the normal channel the way I normally do, stalled out, and I didn't catch it. Um, Normally, I check my analytics, I check view traffic, and I try to respond to likes and things. But I worked a pretty brutal 3 day stretch there. Felt like all I was doing was going to work, coming home, maybe grabbing something to eat, and going back to bed, um, which was uh, pretty rough. And I was able to get the podcast recorded, but I didn't check on them and make sure they were uploaded. So today I figured out what the issue was. I had some time, um, and I was able to stagger them out a little bit. I got all three, or they are supposed to be going up today. Hopefully, they do make it live today. I think I figured out what the issue was, and I tried to change some things with my automation, so that should be better. Now, the current plan is for this to go up on Monday, tomorrow. Now, I'm doing that intentionally. I'm going to manually upload it um, probably when I get off of work in the afternoon. Now, that may not happen. If something comes up and I have to work late or whatever, it may be later into Monday, but the plan is still for it to go up on Monday. Now, I appreciate the views you guys have given the delayed content. I've seen a little bit of the analytics um, as I sit down to record this, even stuff that came up in the middle of the night. You guys were watching, so I appreciate that and I thank you for that. Now, the other thing people have been asking for, at least one person has asked for, is for the TikTok short content to be on Spotify. And I'm running into problems where, unlike every other place I put my content, normally I just am able to record the shorts on TikTok, upload them, and automation takes care of the rest. They go everywhere. But there's no issues with the video file. But with the exception of one so far, every video I've tried to upload um, to Spotify, Spotify has an issue with something in the way TikTok records the videos. And I'm still trying to figure out that and figure out if there is a way I can um, fix the issue, whether it's through an editor or something like that. Now, Spotify has no problem with how Zoom does the uploads. And if I thought that would just fix everything, I would record all my TikToks on Zoom and upload them to uh, Spotify that way. But the problem is when you use outside apps to record, sometimes TikTok has a problem with that. So I'm kind of stuck here, trying to figure out what I can do to get that uploaded. Let me know if you would prefer, in the meantime, for at least the audio files on Spotify, and if that is something you want, I can work on getting those uploaded here coming up. So that's just kind of a peek behind the hood. One of the things to remember is that as of right now, and the entire time I've been doing this, I am a one man operation. So I don't have anybody working with me. Nobody else handling my uploads or editing. I don't do really any editing. Um, no clever thumbnails, which is why sometimes I've noticed YouTube picks the most unflattering screen grab from my video to sometimes use as the uh, pick for the episode, but it's because I don't set one. I let the automation handle all of it. Okay. So we've got a lot to talk about here. Uh, and there's always stuff to talk about with this administration. Now, probably on tomorrow's podcast going into Tuesday, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the uh, 5 candidates for Iowa governor on the Republican side. None of them are good candidates. Um, but and I'm going to kind of break that down a little bit. Now, we already know that Rob Sand is going to be, or should be, the de facto Democratic nominee. Everybody else has dropped out. And I've said before, I think Rob Sand gives us the best chance of winning. Now, one of the problems, before I get into the rest of the news, that we are dealing with when it comes to not just these primaries, well, primaries sort of, but voting right now, specifically when it comes to uh, not all Republicans, but specifically MAGA. MAGA views voting like sports. And I've used this analogy before. If their team wins, that's all that matters. Um, and one of the things I noticed, I am working on setting up a Facebook page for the podcast. And when it's up, I will let you know when it's ready to go, and the link will be in my link tree. But I've thought about doing this for a little bit, just as another way of getting my content and the message out there, as well as using Instagram. Uh, and again, I'll let you know when they are up with content, etc. But I started a new account on Facebook, and I'm haven't even liked anybody, haven't even friended anybody, haven't set anything up, haven't even made a post, haven't even uploaded a profile picture yet. But because it's using my location, Facebook is coming out and it's giving me a whole bunch of stuff for the upcoming primary. Like every post is almost political, which is fine because, as you can tell, I like politics. But it's all Republican politics because right now the Republican primary is messy. And I'm going through these comment sections on some of these ads and these posts about the varying candidates on the Republican side. And they are pretty awful. And a lot of them they've all said basically the same thing. In that now there are some Republicans that are saying they're voting for Rob Sand, and I appreciate everyone that realizes all of these Republican candidates are bad. So if you are one of them, or you're more of a moderate conservative, you're not the people I'm talking to. I'm talking to the hardcore MAGAs. As Iowa is first in the nation for cancer rates, which is horrible, last in the nation for education, we've got some of the worst nitrate levels in drinking water, and we have a budget deficit that right now is only being offset because we have a budget surplus in the bank account. And the best way to look at that is if you've got $1 million in your savings account, but every month you are, paying out $10,000 more than you make in bills, eventually that $1 million in your savings account is going to be gone. And that's what the state of Iowa is looking at. Now it's different numbers than that, but the math holds. Eventually that money is going to be gone if you don't do something to raise funds. And that's one of the things Rob Sand is looking at. Well, as I'm going through the comment sections of these Facebook pages and these posts, well, anybody's better than Rob Sand. Oh, he's just going to raise our taxes. Got to vote red. We put in too much work to turn Iowa red. They're not talking policy. A lot of these people, they're not saying why any of the candidates are better than anybody else. They are just, my team's got to win. My team's got to win. My team's got to win. That works great in sports. That does not work in politics. you have to pick the candidate that does the best for your state, or who you think is going to represent you, do the best job for you in Washington D.C., etc. Now, I bring that up because, um, in the past, I'll admit I have voted Republican, Democrat, Independent. I've never regretted a vote for a Democrat. I have regretted the other two votes. And part of that is because not always has the Republican done the best job for us. Now, one of the examples I use is Chuck Grassley. I have in my life voted for Chuck Grassley. Do I regret it? Yes. At the time, did I think he was going to be able to do the best for Iowa? Yes. Now, granted, I was much younger then, and it was before he started doing some of the bullshit that he's been doing lately. And by lately, I'm going all the way back to Obama's term. But in his last couple of terms, where he really started treating politics like uh, our side versus theirs and trying to play obstructionist. At one time, having Chuck Grassley in Congress meant he was pushing for things like the Farm Bill, and he still does, but it actually meant something. He was helping out and working for Iowa farmers. But since Barack Obama became president, he did things like held up Merrick Garland's Senate seat. I regret voting for a man who did that. And ever since, I have not voted for Chuck Grassley. When he said he was expecting to oversee the vote count on January 6th, 2021, because, you know, we saw what happened. Was he involved? Did he um, think there was going to be a reason Mike Pence wouldn't be there? Did he think Mike Pence was just going to chicken out and not show up? I don't know. But it also left a bad taste in my mouth. And if I hadn't already decided to never vote for Chuck Grassley again, I would have decided to never vote for Chuck Grassley again from that. You need to vote for the person who best represents your interests all around the board. But Republicans like to treat it like a sporting event, and it's got to be their side. And I'm talking specifically about the MAGAs more than anything. Now we will get back into candidates and doing things in a minute. But Donald Trump, I talked about this a little bit on, I think, Friday and Saturday. There were a couple of rulings that came out about the Kennedy Center, and then there was also the Freedom 250 concert story. Now, this Freedom 250 concert was Donald Trump's answer to the America 250 group that was set up by Congress to be a bipartisan celebration of the United States during the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Now, and I'll probably do a deeper dive video around July 4th, and it'll probably be a bonus podcast actually about the significance of it from a historical standpoint. But uh, the signing of the Declaration of Independence was the moment where we told England we want to be free. We don't need a king. And a big chunk of it, we wouldn't have pushed for independence if Parliament at the time would have said, okay, you guys set up your own rules, and basically would have treated us like independent, like kind of like how our federal system works now. But that's not what happened. They were trying to impose uh, big chunks of control, and we had no say in any of that control. Now, it was a huge thing, and that is where we determined that that is our birthday. Okay, so the 250th celebration is coming up. Donald Trump has they were doing what they were going to call the Great American State Fair on the National Mall, which was going to be a concert. And there was going to be other events too, but there was going to be like 9 artists um, that were going to appear. But then it comes out that Donald Trump is pushing this, and they start backing out because they realized they were lied to. They thought they were dealing with the bipartisan congressional committee, and it was going to be a nonpartisan event. That not that this was set up by the Trump administration itself, and that it was going to be more Republican leaning and Donald Trump leaning event. Now, Donald Trump says on Truth Social yesterday, he says, quote, I understand artists are getting the yips having to do with their performance on Wednesday. So I am thinking about bringing the number one attraction anywhere in the world, the man who gets much larger audiences than Elvis in his prime, and he does so without a guitar, the man who loves our country more than anyone else, the man who some say is the greatest president in history, the GOAT, Donald J. Trump, to take the place of these highly paid third rate artists and give a major speech rallying the country forward like I have done ever since being president. Now, there's multiple problems with that. First of all, they are getting the yips, as he called it, because they don't want to be associated with Donald Trump. Donald Trump does not unify people. He is not the greatest president of all time. And he's doing things like this because he's afraid that when he's gone, people aren't going to remember him and cheer him. I bring in uh, pop culture references. I guess the thought that just popped in my head was from a Futurama episode. The one where they go to an ancient Egyptian like planet and Bender decides to convince them that he is supposed to be the next pharaoh to build monuments to himself because he is worried about what it's going to be like when he is gone. Um, and that's what Donald Trump is doing. He wants to be remembered when he is gone. Now, this Freedom 250 concert originally was going to have a whole bunch of artists, but Martina McBride has backed out, said she was misled about what she was agreeing to perform at. We talked about that the other day. That she said it on Instagram. I asked a lot of questions, and I was assured this was a nonpartisan event that was meant to celebrate all 50 states. That turned out to be misleading. And I might have got the quote slightly wrong there, but that's effectively what she said. Brett Michaels backed out. He made the difficult decision to step away from the performance. He cited safety concerns for himself, the band, the crew, and his family. Unfortunately, what was presented to us was a celebration of our country has evolved into something much more divisive than what I agreed to be part of. Also includes uh, some of the people that walked away. I mentioned it on one of the other podcasts. I think it was Thursday after sitting down and doing a live with the Rational Boomer. He's got connections to Morris Day and the Time, and he announced that he had talked to them and they weren't going to be performing. The next day, that it comes out publicly that they weren't performing. Uh, CNC Music Factory, um, Young MC. I'm trying to remember the rest of them. They're not all listed here in that are backed out. But now Donald Trump says he's going to hold a speech, and he compared himself to being able to draw crowds bigger than a young Elvis. I doubt it. If you could bring Elvis back in his prime right now, he would probably draw a bigger crowd than Donald Trump. But this is how Donald Trump's ego deals with things. And he is going to try to make this about him. If he's talking about a speech, that means MAGA rally. And he's going to be surrounded by loyal fans cheering for him, and that's what he needs to drive his ego. Now, speaking of his ego, Donald Trump put his name on the Kennedy Center uh, late last year. And ever since he put his name on it, after naming himself to the board of the Kennedy Center, and artists started backing out. and everything, and they're trying to say, well, it was a unanimous decision. A federal judge has ruled that his name has to be taken off within 14 days, that he did not have the authority to put his name on it, regardless of what the board said. The judge also said that it cannot be closed for 2 years for these so-called renovations. What he said in his ruling was that they have to prove the renovations are structurally needed because the Kennedy Center is supposed to be performing, it's a center for performing arts. It's supposed to be available for people to, uh, you know, book in, shows on, and do those kind of things. And if they're closing it for 2 years, they have to prove it's actually necessary, not just Donald Trump saying, well, we got to close it for 2 years. He was basically going to close it for the rest of his term so he didn't have to deal with artists continually backing away from something with his name on it. And they were going to call it renovations. Now, I said at the time, I fully expected it to be nothing more than paint and carpet and maybe, things like that to make it look like they did some renovations. Um, Nothing major. And what the judge wants to know is, they want experts and testimony and things said under oath where they can be held liable for perjury, contempt of court, and those kind of things to prove that the renovations are needed. But Donald Trump goes on a rant. Now, this comes from the Hill. President Trump said on Friday that a federal judge should be ashamed of himself for blocking his administration's move to add Trump's name to the Kennedy Center and ruling the board members inappropriately voted to close the Performing Arts Center for renovations this summer. U.S. District Judge Christopher Cooper, an appointee of former President Obama, sided with a challenge to the renovation project from ex officio board member Representative Joyce Beatty, Democrat from Ohio. It was set to close July 5th for 2 years. Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social, Judge Cooper was given a presentation by leading building and construction experts as how structurally dangerous the building is, with rotting beams, parking areas that are subject to collapse, and various other life and safety problems, in addition to the fact that it also needs a major renovation from an aesthetic standpoint, but he was not swayed and said he wants the building to incredibly remain open and therefore dangerous. He added, Judge Cooper should be ashamed of himself. I cannot be involved with a situation where the danger to the public is allowed to flourish in plain and open sight. Now, he has ordered the Commerce Department to make all necessary arrangements to grant Congress authority over the institution's upkeep. Except again, Donald Trump doesn't understand what the judge said. Now, in Friday's decision, the federal judge cited Congress's authority over any name change to the Kennedy Center. Quote, Cooper says in his ruling, quote, the Kennedy Center's organic statute makes it crystal clear that the center is to be named for President Kennedy. It cannot bear any other formal name or public memorial based on the board's unilateral say-so. End quote. That's in what was passed by Congress. But Donald Trump doesn't care. He doesn't. He's a narcissist. He wants his name on everything. Now, the planned Kennedy Center renovations are part of Trump's administration's broader efforts to update landmarks in Washington, D.C. under his D.C. Safe and Beautiful Task Force. But what the judge said in his ruling was not that it couldn't happen. What he said, rather, was we need more information. Prove that it was actually necessary, because the charter says certain things about it remaining open, and basically he's looking at what was posted not only in evidence, but I'm guessing also on social media, because Donald Trump at the time when he decided to close it, it was coming right after acts were canceling left and right and left and right, and he was getting embarrassed. He was. So he decides, nope, we're not doing that. We're going to close it down. Well, that's ridiculous. And this judge is effectively saying that. Now, Donald Trump on Saturday described the U.S. court system as rigged. In a lengthy post on Truth Social, claimed our court system is rigged, no different than our political system is rigged, and the people of our country know it. That is why I got overwhelmingly elected as president in record numbers and will fight, fight, fight. But it's not rigged. Okay? It's not rigged. Donald Trump is claiming it is rigged because he's losing. Uh, he's losing. He's not getting the decisions he wants, so it's rigged against him. He has done this his entire life. He's not welcome in the New York social circles. They're rigged against him. He's not welcome in Hollywood. Doesn't get the accolades for The Apprentice that he wants. It's rigged against him. He comes to Iowa in 2016 for the Iowa caucuses, doesn't win, loses to Ted Cruz. It's rigged against him. Going into the 2016 election, whereby all metrics, it looked like, without a shadow of a doubt, he was going to lose. It looked like it was going to be a cakewalk for Hillary Clinton. And that was part of the problem. She treated it like it was going to be a cakewalk. And he kept saying, going up to it, well, the only way I could lose is if it's rigged. I can only lose if it's rigged. He said that going into 2020 when he was in the presidency, and he was trying to say that the only way he could lose is if it was rigged against him. But he was sitting in the Oval Office. He's always complaining that things are rigged. Trump has accused Cooper of being influenced by his wife, attorney Amy Jeffries, who the president called a radical left Democrat associated with his political opponents. Uh, his wife, Jeffries, is a partner at Hecker Fink, a New York based law firm that represented E. Jean Carroll in a successful lawsuit against Trump for sexual battery and defamation. Now, he said about her, Amy is totally wired into the left system from her husband down, and it is impossible for me to be treated fairly. He has a total conflict of interest and should be brought up on charges for not revealing these facts. That is why the Kennedy Center will soon be closed, probably never to open again. But he was just told he can't close it. See, he is trying to just get his way here. He also railed against the Supreme Court's February decision that struck down the bulk of his tariffs, which the court said exceeded his constitutional authority. He wrote, quote, that is why at a different level and with different players, our country lost the tariff case and is forced to pay back $149 billion in money we received from people who hate everything we stand for, end quote. But again, he doesn't understand tariffs. We've been over this before. He doesn't understand how tariffs work. They are not paid by the country that he puts the tariffs on. Now, one of two things is going on here. Either he completely doesn't understand, which I believe that is probably the case, or he thinks his supporters are dumb enough and the American people are dumb enough to not understand how tariffs work. They are a tax paid by the American people who end up having to, because it gets passed on down the supply chain at every step of the way. The example I'm going to use, okay, if I don't know, pick a company. If company A brings in a product from Canada and it costs $10 with a 50% tariff on it, it now costs 15 once it crosses that border. Now that company A sells it to company B, it now costs them 15. So company B is going to pay 15, and they're going to put it out on their shelves, not at 12 or 13 like they used to. They're going to put it up at 17, 18, 19 because it costs them more to bring in the door. We pay the tariff, and we probably, in a lot of cases, because I know how businesses operate, we pay a markup on those tariffs as well. Several of the companies I worked for, they had ridiculous markups where they wanted to make a certain percentage minimum on every product and a certain percentage overall. And in order to do that, there were certain products that were ridiculously cheap cost wise, but would end up being put up out for sale at 6, 7, 800% markup. And that works okay for products under $10. But what if you're doing that for bigger expensive items? It's all corporate greed because they want to end up making all the money. They don't want just a fraction of it. They want all of the money available in their particular market. Your fast food restaurant, they don't want some of your fast food dollars. You know, they want as much of it as they can get. They're not happy with uh, making whatever they can, right? They're always wanting more. Same thing with your grocery stores. A lot of them, they're not content making the same amount year after year after year and having steady uh, income. They want, oh, well, you got to make X amount of sales and X amount of profit over last year's sales and profit, or you're not doing good enough. And in some cases, if they don't make those numbers after so many years, those locations close. Doesn't matter if they're at least profitable, but not hitting goals. If they're not hitting the right numbers, sometimes that's why locations close. Um, it's ridiculous, right? Also, one of the things that can happen with these, and again, they just want all of the money, is sometimes there could be events in your town, and I know this has happened in several places, where there was a big event, and that event was big enough to put a lot of businesses to be profitable for an entire year. Uh, and I know of several franchises in uh, a couple of these towns where, for whatever reason, the franchisee lost the franchise, sold it back to corporate, whatever happened there. Um, and when corporate took over, started looking at the books week in and week out and went, you guys aren't making any money. Oh, got to close you. They closed. If they would have waited even a little bit longer, that event was coming up, the big event that would have made them profitable for the entire year. Um, now, but it's all about not being happy making whatever you can make for money. So with these tariffs, we pay the cost. They're not going to eat that. And if they do eat it, it's short term, but then we're going to pay for it down the road somewhere else. Uh, Now, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, the agency that collected the tariffs, they're in the process of refunding over 160 billion, which is even more than what Donald Trump said. But he's railing against all of it, okay? And he is kind of having a meltdown over it because he's not getting his way. Now, speaking of not getting his way, there is something this administration is apparently trying to do. Again, this comes from The Hill. Proposed NDA for federal workers sparked diverse backlash. A proposal by the Trump administration to push federal workers to sign NDA agreements has sparked accusations that the White House is trying to silence its workforce, including those who have been speaking to the press. The Office of Personnel Management, the HR arm of the government, is on Tuesday proposed crafting NDAs for both new and existing employees, saying it was a response to major leaks. Those who violate the policy, as well as those who refuse to sign, could be fired. I don't know that that's legal under whistleblower laws, but they don't care about that. Although NDAs are standard in some industries, the rollout prompted criticisms from unions, press groups, and those who represent government whistleblowers who say the policy is just the latest effort to stifle federal workers and even push them out the door. The legality of the proposal has also been questioned, as all Americans, including those on the federal workforce, cannot have their First Amendment rights trampled by the government. We have a First Amendment, typically. Uh, Jessica Levinson, a constitutional law professor at Loyola Law School, told The Hill, "You can absolutely style a legal and constitutional NDA, and you can absolutely style a wildly illegal and unconstitutional NDA." The, the First Amendment only applies as a protection against government action, not private action, and any other private employer can, by contract, require you to not talk about a whole bunch of things, and that's pretty routine. But when it comes to not a private employer, but the government acting as your employer, then the First Amendment is implicated. And then you have to make sure the NDA still allows for public employees to engage in protected speech. Now, that's a lot. What does that all mean? Now, this is from uh, Jessica Levinson. And what she was saying there is that the government, because of the First Amendment, can't just basically say, can't talk to the press about anything. Now, there are things that are classified. That's different. They're not talking about, you know, not being able to talk to the media, the press, or anybody else about classified information. What they are talking about here is these NDAs are going to basically try to prevent people potentially from talking about anything. And there's already laws on the books that prohibit federal employees from talking about certain subjects and it already has stiff criminal penalties for doing so. Like I said, classified information, those kind of things. But they don't want anything leaked out because every time something comes out, they got to defend it. They got to go, it's making this administration look bad. Not because they're not doing the bad things, and they don't want to stop doing the bad things. They just don't want people finding out about the bad things. Now, President Trump routinely used NDAs in his own businesses before running for office, but this is the first time the government has sought to bring them into the public realm. If enacted, the proposal outlines additional strict penalties, including termination if an employee shares non-public, confidential, or proprietary information, or any information related to internal deliberations of the government. The Office of Personnel Management has defended the NDA as nothing more than standard practice. OPM Director Scott Cooper wrote in a blog post, quote, "One of the more surprising reactions to OPM's recently proposed NDA rule is the suggestion that asking employees to keep sensitive internal deliberations confidential is somehow shocking or unprecedented. Spoiler alert, it's not. In fact, this is organizational management 101, end quote. Except here's the thing. It's situational, okay? If what is being debated or deliberated is illegal, immoral, unconstitutional, those things are not covered by NDAs anyway. NDAs can't be used to cover up for criminal activity. Now, he doesn't think that it's a problem here to say, well, we're going to have everybody sign an NDA. Nobody can talk to the press. Nobody can talk about anything. That's stifling your First Amendment right. The government only wants you to be able to say and do whatever they want you to do. And that's just not kosher. I think this is the same exact story. Yeah, I just opened it twice. Okay. It was another story. I had another tab open on the NDA, but it was the exact same story. Um, it's just it's a bad deal all around. Okay, and if they're going to try to do this, there's going to be pushback. There's going to be lawsuits, and Donald Trump will lose again. He'll go back to ranting and raving about the courts being rigged. We know his playbook. This is how he operates. This is how everything goes with him. And though he tries to play from a position of strength, it actually comes off as a position of being very, very weak. All right. Now, I mentioned earlier we're going to get back to people doing things they shouldn't be doing and stuff getting out. Uh, there's two stories here. I'm going to start with this one. They both come from the Hill. They're both connected. Reports. Plattner's wife told campaign staff he sent sexual messages to other women. The wife of Maine Senate hopeful Graham Plattner, Democrat, alerted campaign staff last year that he had exchanged sexually explicit messages with other women, according to reports. The New York Times and Wall Street Journal on Saturday reported that his wife, Amy Gretner, told former senior campaign staff uh, Genevieve McDonald about sexually explicit messages she had discovered on his phone early in their marriage. Gertner reportedly shared this information with staffers days before a major Labor Day rally with Bernie Sanders, warning that the behavior could be a political liability. It was also reportedly disclosed during the campaign's internal vetting process for Plattner, but campaign staffers ultimately decided that the messages were a private matter that the couple was addressing through counseling and would not pose a threat to the campaign. Current and former aides offered differing accounts about the scope of the communications, with McDonald telling the Times that it was as many as a dozen women, while a current campaign official is saying it was up to six. Uh, Graham Plattner strategist Morris Katz wrote on Twitter, "It's no one's effing business what happened in Amy and Graham's marriage before he was ever a candidate for office. There should be no place in our politics for incompetent, opportunistic operatives who violate privacy, betray trust, and prioritize vengeance over decency." And they have been married since 2023. When reached for comment, Plattner's campaign, uh, Gretner defended her husband and accused the former aide of betraying her trust by spreading malicious gossip about the couple's marriage. She said, Gretner, his wife, said, quote, "I confided deeply personal details about my marriage to someone I considered a friend. I trusted this person with the most private chapter of our lives, the early days of our marriage, before any campaign was on our mind. I am deeply hurt by her betrayal and the invasion of our privacy." Also said, we did the hard work that marriage requires. We went to counseling. We were honest with each other in ways that weren't easy, and we came through it, not in spite of how much we've been through, but because of how much we love each other and the life we've built. Our marriage today is stronger than before. I know who Graham is. I know the man I married and the husband he has been to me on the best and worst days of my life. That hasn't changed and it won't. End quote. Plattner's campaign has faced several public relations challenges despite emerging as a frontrunner for the Democratic nomination after Maine Governor Janet Mills dropped out, commanding a 9-point lead against Susan Collins. Now, he has had other issues. He had a chest tattoo he had to cover up that had apparently some connections to 1930s Germany, I believe. He didn't know it when he got the tattoo. He just thought it looked cool, being a young and dumb uh, person, and you know those things. Once he was told of the symbolism, and it was actually revealed to him, Later on, he had it covered up and he apologized. He said it wasn't because of the views. Now, continuing with the story about what's going on here, what I don't know is why this is coming out now. Who is smearing his campaign? Well, the part from that story that I didn't see, and I don't know if it's going to be in this one, is were these consensual messages? This sounds like it is different than what happened to Eric Swalwell. Should he have sent them? No, but was he also a private citizen at that point and not running for Congress? Yeah. Did he tell the campaign? Yeah. And now apparently it sounds like the person who in his campaign was supposed to know about it is the one coming forward and talking about it. Are they trying to sabotage his campaign race? I mean, Maine was one of the states we were looking for as a potential pickup. Now he does have questions to answer, and that's what this article here says. Uh, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, Democrat, on Sunday said Maine Senate candidate Graham Plattner has questions to answer following reports that Plattner allegedly shared sexually explicit messages with multiple other women. ABC's Jonathan Karl asked Booker on This Week about whether this and other controversies may jeopardize Democratic hopes to get the Senate seat in Maine. Booker said, "Yes, I have concerns. That guy has questions to answer, and that's what campaigns are for." End quote. Booker emphasized, though, that if Democrats do not win back both chambers of Congress in the midterms, we will continue to have an out-of-control president, and that is true. Booker said, quote, "When I go all over New Jersey and see hundreds and hundreds and thousands of New Jerseyans losing their health care and millions more seeing their health care costs go up, as I have families who say, I can't afford gas for my car and childcare for my children, I know so much is running on Democrats taking control of the Senate." End quote. Now, this story came out on Saturday. It's still unclear here, even on this article, how many women were involved. And again, I think there's a difference between this and at least from what it sounds like so far. And this could be a developing story. So this is a developing story. There could be more details coming out later today, tomorrow, Tuesday, whatever, about the difference here. Now, the problem with Eric Swalwell was that it wasn't just messages. Apparently, there was, uh, you know, sexual assault involved, drinking involved, where he put women in positions where he could do those things. And there were messages involved, but they were also unwanted. We don't know that the women on the other end of receiving these explicit messages were not interested in receiving those messages. You know, there's a wildly different line there, right? It is wildly different. Uh, between actively doing something when somebody isn't interested, and if he was, we don't know what the situation here was with these women, if they were, you know, if he was attempting to cheat, or maybe it was just, maybe without actually dating and doing that kind of cheating, maybe it was just the messages back and forth, but they were flirtatious. Yeah, they were explicit, and he was doing that. We don't know. Okay. Now, if it comes out that they were sent to women and it wasn't reciprocated on their end or wanted on their end, like it was with Eric Swalwell. And if it comes out that it was um, the same type of a situation, fully expect him to resign, drop out of the race. Um, there's no reason why he should stay in. And as much as I would hate to lose what could potentially be a pickup in Maine, we have to hold our own accountable. If we want to hold them on, accountable on their side, we have to hold them accountable on our side. Now I'm just looking here. Primary election in Maine is next Tuesday, June 9th. So there's a little over a week for them to do some damage control here. And try to figure out what the rest of the story is before Maine voters go to the polls. Now, I believe there might still be one other candidate. Let's see here. Maine Secretary of State. Candidate list. Let's see. This. I think David Costello is still in the race, but by all accounts, David Costello was nowhere close to beating Plattner. Now, this story, if he is still in the race, could potentially springboard him to win the primary. We'll have to wait and see. But I don't know how Costello does against Susan Collins. Right now, it looks like Graham Plattner, up until this story, was all set to take on Susan Collins. So Graham Plattner has questions to answer. We got to figure out what's going on here with this article, with this whole story. We need more information from the Plattner campaign, etc., because this looks really bad right now. And if it is as bad as the Swalwell deal, he definitely should be out of the race. All right, that is going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I hope you guys have a great day. I will be back again tomorrow. I appreciate the patience, like I said at the open, with the delayed updates for the last few days. And hopefully we will be back on track getting these uploaded in a timely manner. Also, just a reminder that if anybody does want to be on the show, shoot me an email, analyticaliowan@gmail.com, and we can set up a time. We'll do a Zoom call, and we'll just discuss politics. Doesn't matter what state you're from. You don't have to be from Iowa. We can talk national politics. If you got something you want to share about your local state, that you think maybe people would like to know. Maybe you've got insight into uh, a red area that may turn blue or purple. Would love to hear it. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Hope you guys have a great day, and we will be back tomorrow.